The movie opens in Romania in 2004. Father Dumitru and several nuns bring Sister Adelina, believed to be possessed by a demon, into the church. As they lay her down, she lunges at one of the nuns, but the others quickly restrain her hands and feet, while Dumitru begins the exorcism. Together, they recite prayers, but the demon's power causes objects to topple around them, and after a tense struggle, Adelina lets out a piercing scream before the scene abruptly cuts to black.
Comment. Subscribe to Recapss Horror.
4 days later, Dumitru is arrested for Adelina's murder. Nicole tells her boss and Uncle Phil that the autopsy shows homicide, revealing she was tied to a cross for 3 days without food or water. She adds that she spoke to the priest's lawyer, who agreed to arrange an interview for her. Aware of her motives, Phil points out that criticizing Faith won't bring her mother back, but after Nicole's persistent pleading, he reluctantly agrees. Upon reaching Romania to cover the story, Nicole questions Dumitru about not receiving support from the church, and he replies that he expected it, as they never approved of his methods. However, his actions were never for the church. He was doing it for God and his congregation. Nicole asks why he believes the woman was possessed, and he reveals that she told him about a sexual experience she had in Germany. This act led her to question her faith, making her vulnerable to becoming a target. He is convinced that her seduction was influenced by the devil, emphasizing that demons are everywhere, always waiting for their opportunity. Nicole mentions him crucifying her, and he clarifies that they did it out of necessity. The demon, aware of their intentions, had become violent against Adelina, so they took her into the church, as they wanted her to feel as close to God as they could get her. It took time, but they eventually obtained the name of the demon possessing her. Dumitru describes it as an exceptionally powerful entity, one capable of invoking the names of God and the Virgin Mary. Only by the end of the 3rd day did he feel the demon begin to weaken. But just then, the bishop arrived and ordered the exorcism to stop. The moment Dumitru looked into Adelina's eyes, he knew it was over, but the demon had sensed their conflict, undoing all of his progress, and it no longer feared them. He insists that Adelina would still be alive if the bishop hadn't interfered. Nicole asks what happened, and Dumitru replies that the demon took Adelina's life on the way to the hospital. He insists that if he had only been given a little more time, he could have saved her. Nicole acknowledges the need to confront possession, but points out that he has no formal training, and he responds that Moses had none either, yet God gave him the power to part the Red Sea. Dumitru explains he left his studies because the church's strict rules would have stopped him from truly helping those in need. Now, as Nicole is about to leave, Dumitru holds her hand and says God told him she is here to help. At the hospital, the coroner informs her that Adelina's death resulted from a collapsed larynx, obstructing her air supply, yet no bruise marks were present. During the examination of the neck area, he speculated on the possibility of oral cancer affecting the larynx, but the tissue samples and biopsies yielded inconclusive results, perplexing him, as he had never encountered such a case before. He then presents Adelina's vial to her, prompting her to question how, without a clear understanding, he can determine the cause of death. And the coroner states there are enough factors to make an educated guess, and in this case, the 3-day ordeal clearly played a major role in the girl's tragic death. Nicole tells Phil that Dumitru blames the nun's death on Bishop Gornick stopping the exorcism, while the coroner suspects murder, and she is heading to Tanaku to attend Adelina's funeral. In Tanaku, she arrives at an old convent where Adelina's funeral is taking place, and Bishop Gornick is also present. Amidst the gathering, she observes another nun profoundly affected by Adelina's death. After the funeral, Nicole approaches the grieving nun, introduces herself, and says she doesn't understand how Father Dumitru could kill Adelina, but the nun insists they didn't kill her. Subsequently, Nicole returns to the church to inspect Adelina's lifeless body, when the candles suddenly extinguish and she begins hearing strange sounds. She then sees a door swinging and hears eerie, whispering voices. Drawn by curiosity, she follows them, which leads her to a mysterious basement, Inside, she discovers bloodstains on the floor and traces them to the room where the crucifix, used to bind Adelina during the exorcism, is stored. She realizes that these bloodstains could be Adelina's and immediately raises her camera to take pictures of the scene. But Bishop Gornick suddenly appears, startling her. She apologizes, but he drags her out, ending her investigation. While at the market, Nicole notices a man selling unusual masks. Later at the hotel, she asks the receptionist about it, and he explains the village is preparing for the Strigoi festival. In the past, villagers exhumed the body of someone deemed evil, cut out the heart, burned it, mixed the ashes with well water, and drank it. Masks concealed their identities from the spirits of the dead, but today, the festival has become more like Halloween. Following this, Nicole visits a church and meets Father Anton. She introduces herself and tells him that she came in here hoping to talk to him. She asks if he thinks Father Dumitru was responsible for Adelina's death, and he says he don't think it would be fair for him to say anything because he wasn't there. She then mentions seeing a nun with brown hair crying over the casket, and Anton identifies her as Sister Vaduva and the man beside her as Adelina's brother, Stefan. Nicole relays Sister Vaduva's claim that they didn't kill Adelina and asks if there's something the church is concealing. Anton suggests that if she wants the church's perspective, she should talk to Bishop Gornick, as Dumitru's monastery fell under his governance and sanctifying responsibility. Nicole returns to her hotel, and the door she had just closed suddenly swings open on its own, but she shrugs it off and shuts it again. The next day, she meets Bishop Gornick and apologizes for yesterday, to which he says it wasn't the right time or place for either of them. Nicole questions why the church isn't defending Father Dumitru's actions, saying exorcisms aren't out of the ordinary within his church. Gornick explains that after the fall of communism 20 years ago, people were once again free to practice religion, leading to a surge of monasteries and churches. The church couldn't train clergy fast enough, and Father Dumitru was among those ordained by Gornick himself. While many priests might see only a few exorcisms in a year, Dumitru had performed 4 in the last 10 months, as the poor often turned to the church before Romania's struggling healthcare system. Gornick stresses that Adelina was not possessed, but mentally ill, and admits with regret that had he removed Dumitru sooner, her death might have been avoided. She calls Phil, explaining that Bishop Gornick stopped the exorcism because the nun wasn't possessed, and it looked as if Father Dumitru was killing her. Phil asks if he needed church approval, and she says he was supposed to, but this wasn't his first unnecessary exorcism. Phil remarks, "It sounds like a madman murdering a nun," and she agrees, calling it brutal. Nicole then visits the monastery, but finds it locked, so she jumps the gate. She goes to Adelina's room, finding it in a dilapidated state with scratch marks on the floor, and nearby, she discovers a nail that belonged to Adelina. She also finds a box there, and when she opens it, it contains photos of Adelina and Vaduva, which she places in her bag. But suddenly, she is startled by the presence of a boy. Frightened, she comes out of the building to leave, but hears whispering, and notices the boy standing on a wall. And when she looks at him, he raises his hands. That evening, she meets Anton, voicing her disbelief at Adelina's treatment, and Anton explains that, from their perspective, they were not harming her, but were trying to stop the demon from doing it. He explains that every exorcism is different, but follows stages. The first is presence, where the demon must be identified as it takes control, often denying the food and water. Next is the breakpoint, marked by panic, confusion, hallucinations, strange noises, and foul odors. Then comes the clash, a direct battle as the demon chooses whether to stay or return to hell. Finally, in the expulsion, God's will prevails and the demon is cast out in the name of Jesus. Nicole asks, but why the demon killed her? And he replies that it no longer needed her, and because it wasn't exorcised, it was free to possess again. Nicole asks, can demons possess again? And Anton introduces the concept of transference, where the demon moves from one vessel to another. This can occur through physical contact with the possessed, but more commonly, it happens through a weakened soul. The possessed reflect the demon's anger and dark soul. To aid her understanding, Anton gives Nicole a book containing valuable information about demons that she might find useful. Nicole asks him about a photo in it, and Anton explains that sometimes demons have help. Later, in the hotel, Nicole examines the photos she took and is astonished to find a faded demonic figure on the crucifix in one of the images. She picks up her glass to take a sip of wine, but feels something off and notices a fly in it. She downs the wine, refills her glass, and begins searching for information on a demon named Agaris. After a while, her laptop screen glitches, and as she tries to fix it, it seems as though the screen is pulling her toward it, and suddenly, a demonic face appears, startling her. Gathering herself, she picks up her glass, only to notice 2 flies now floating in it. The next day, she visits Sister Vaduva, who initially expresses her reluctance to talk. Nicole shows her the photo, asserting that Father Dumitru killed her friend. But just then, Stefan comes there, and Nicole directly asks him who killed Adelina. Stefan accuses them of printing lies about his sister, claiming they don't care about the truth. Nicole insists they want to help, and Vaduva states that the demon killed Adelina. In a flashback, Vaduva brings breakfast to Adelina and finds her singing a strange, eerie song. Terrified, Vaduva cautiously steps closer, calling out her name, but Adelina doesn't respond and continues singing. Vaduva then notices dead flies scattered in front of her, and her fear escalates when she sees Adelina's demonic form. Adelina suddenly grabs her by the neck and lifts her into the air, and just then, the door bursts open violently. The demon commands Vaduva to leave before it releases her, and a shaken Vaduva rushes out of the room as the door slams shut behind her. Stefan tells Nicole that Adelina had been in Germany for the last year, working as a nanny for a family that had adopted 2 kids from the orphanage. Before taking the job, she underwent a complete psychological exam at the request of the German embassy, passing it successfully. Nicole asks why she came back, and Stefan says she returned to the monastery with the intention of working at the orphanage, and the disturbing events began shortly after her return. Vaduva says that the first thing Adelina wanted to do was visit Father Gabriel and give him a gift. Nicole asks who Father Gabriel is, and Stefan explains that he was a priest who cared for them during their time at the orphanage, sharing a special bond with Adelina. However, after they left, and he became a bishop, they never saw him again, except when he occasionally came to the monastery for work and prayer. In a flashback, Adelina returns from Germany and, accompanied by Vaduva and Stefan, visits the monastery to meet Father Gabriel. However, the church bells start ringing, drawing their attention to Father Gabriel, standing on top of the tower, and in a shocking turn of events, he jumps from the tower, tragically taking his own life. Vaduva shares that they were all devastated, but Adelina suffered the most. Afterwards, she would often find Adelina in the church, quietly crying. On one occasion, as they were all heading in for Mass, Adelina refused to enter, giving the impression that she could see someone terrifying inside. One day, Vaduva found Adelina sitting on the floor of her room, chanting something. As she approached to check on her, Adelina slowly lifted her head, and to Vaduva's horror, a spider emerged from Adelina's nose. That evening, Nicole meets Anton, who admits he read her piece on unanswered prayers, saying he looked it up online. He notes the number of people she quoted whose prayers went unanswered and asks, "What about the prayers that were answered?" Nicole responds, "So it's a selective process, whose prayers God chooses to respond to?" And Anton suggests that, whether due to Satan, human wills, or disbelief, people must understand that God isn't the one who failed to answer. They are the ones who failed to receive. Curious about Nicole's motivation, Anton asks why this is important to her, and Nicole recounts a personal story about her mother's battle with cancer. Her mother chose to embrace faith and reject a potentially successful treatment program. Nicole's attempt to change her mother's mind failed, and they watched her slowly succumb to the illness. She explains that the treatment program ultimately had a 90% success rate, but her mother's faith caused her to lose hope. Anton suggests that her mother's faith caused her to lose her own, noting that her mother seemed fine with it. But Nicole argues that she was simply trying to save her mother's life. Anton says you were doing this for yourself and not for your mother, pointing out that if you found out God existed, you would have no one to blame. After their talk, Anton walks Nicole out and warns her to be careful, saying her anger toward God and lack of faith make her vulnerable, especially after what happened to Sister Adelina. He insists that without faith, she has no protection, but Nicole counters, "What about Adelina? Did her faith protect her?" On her way back to the hotel, Nicole notices a boy wearing a mask who captures her attention. As she walks by him, he stares at her and whispers something in Romanian, implying that he is the same boy she saw at the monastery. The boy continues to follow Nicole to the hotel, and when the receptionist asks if she is okay, she asks if he knows the boy standing outside. The man identifies him as a gypsy named Tavian and asks him to leave, telling her that he is slow in the head. Nicole then shares what Tavian said to her in Romanian, and the man explains that it means "it's watching you." However, Tavian was born without a tongue. Later that night, while Nicole is asleep, she has a dream in which she becomes intimate with Anton, and we see a spider crawling on her pillow. As she turns, the door to her room opens on its own, and she hears disturbing sounds. Terrified, she cautiously steps down from the bed and follows the noise, discovering her door opening and closing on its own. Confused, she edges closer to shut it, when suddenly Adelina tries to enter the room, but Nicole slams the door shut. Adelina begins pounding on it, forcing Nicole to lock it and back away in fear. But before she can process what's happening, Adelina appears again, only to abruptly vanish. The next morning, Nicole arrives at Tavian's house and spots him looking at her from a window. Suddenly, she's startled by a dog, and when she regains her composure, she realizes that the boy has disappeared, so she decides to leave the area. She visits Vaduva, who says Adelina was ashamed of what the devil made her do, constantly reminding her of her sins. Vaduva shares about a letter Adelina had sent months earlier. She had fallen for a boy in Germany who promised marriage, but after giving herself to him, she discovered he had only deceived her. Heartbroken, she returned home seeking God's forgiveness, but instead found herself tormented by the devil. One night, Vaduva noticed Adelina shifting restlessly on her bed, her low moans echoing through the dimly lit room. Uneasy, she crept closer, each step weighted with dread, and when she pulled back the blanket, she recoiled as insects swarmed from between Adelina's legs. Vaduva and Sister Lena filled Adelina's room with crosses, icons, and jars of holy water, desperately trying to shield her. But Adelina suddenly looked at Vaduva. Her eyes burned with fury as she sat upright, her head twisting unnaturally to glare at her. Trembling with fear, Vaduva staggered back, and Adelina then overturned one of the beds, prompting them to hastily flee the room. Nicole asks how Adelina was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and Vaduva recalls a night when faint, strangled screams shattered the silence. Stefan rushed to the girl's room, only to find the beds empty. Panic gripped him as he searched the grounds until the cries led him to the old treehouse. Anxiously, he climbed up to investigate when Adelina suddenly lunged at him, knocking him to the ground below. Shaken, Stefan rushed her to the hospital and recounted everything to the doctors. They advised that Adelina see Dr. Funar, a psychologist who diagnosed her with schizophrenia. Nicole asks if Vaduva was part of the exorcism, to which she says not directly, but she was present there. She describes a terrifying scene where water was falling everywhere. Nicole asks what she means, and she explains that the demon was making it rain, mocking their use of holy water. Suddenly, the table to which Adelina was bound lifted off the ground, and objects began to be hurled across the room, while Adelina's twisted laughter echoed through the chaos. Later that night, while soaking in the bath and listening to a taped interview of Vaduva and Stefan, the lights suddenly cut out, accompanied by a demonic voice, plunging the room into darkness. Startled, she comes out of the bathroom, only to see the pages of the book fluttering before stopping on a page, and her breath catches when she notices a shadow looming behind the window curtain. Trembling, she inches closer, each step dragging with dread. But when she pulls the curtain aside, no one is in there. The window slams shut, making her stumble back, and then the knocks pound against the door. She opens the door and finds Anton there, who asks if she's okay, and she explains that the power went out. He mentions that he wasn't satisfied with how their previous conversation ended, offers an apology, and presents a peace offering. Nicole accepts it, and he tells her that if she has any more questions, she knows where to find him. As he begins to leave, she stops him, asking him to open the bottle while she gets dressed. The scene shifts to an intimate moment between them, but Adelina suddenly appears, jolting Nicole awake as she realizes it was only a nightmare. However, on the table, she finds a note from Anton stating, "A photo says 1,000 words," and that she fell asleep after just one glass. Later, she visits Dr. Funer, who insists that Adelina had some mental illness. She believes that Father Gabriel's death reignited all those old fears of her early childhood with what happened with her father's suicide and her mother's abandonment. She explains that Adelina saw her father end his life, and that's how she ended up in an orphanage. She takes her to the ward where Adelina was treated, explaining that Father Gabriel's death triggered delusions and hallucinations, and ultimately schizophrenia, which should have surfaced a long time ago. Adelina experienced episodes right in the hospital, perceiving everyone around her as demons attempting to harm her. As Nicole drives toward the hotel, her car suddenly breaks down. She struggles to start it, but it won't budge, so she calls Anton, who assures her he'll be there shortly. She thanks him and sets the phone aside, but soon hears a noise outside. Then she hears the sound from behind the car, though she sees no one, until a demonic figure appears in the rearview mirror, even though the seat is empty. A fly then buzzes inside the car, and suddenly someone grips her legs, forcing her to scramble out in fear. As she steps back, she hears eerie whispers echoing around her, prompting her to turn and run into a nearby field. After sprinting a considerable distance, she stops and looks back, only to see nothing until the demon suddenly appears behind her. Terrified, she races back to the road just as Anton arrives. Anton brings her back to the church and warns that running away is exactly what the darkness wants, since she is somehow connected to it. Nicole insists she isn't staying, and he asks if she really thinks it will just go away. He explains that the darkness thrives on fear, but by embracing faith, she gains a way to fight it. Though he doesn't fully understand why, Anton suggests that God wanted her here and that she won't find any answers by running. Later, Anton updates her that the rental company found no issues with her car and will have it dropped off in front of the hotel. He reassures her that they are safe where they are. Nicole then reveals that she was with her mom in the hospital on the night she passed away. Despite her mother knowing Nicole's disbelief in God, she held Nicole's hand and implored her to accept Jesus as her savior for the possibility of spending eternity together. Even in her dying moments, Nicole declined, and her mother carried that with her. Nicole expresses deep regret and a desire to apologize. The next day, Nicole leaves, leaving a note for Anton. She tells Phil that whatever is going on here, she doesn't want to be part of it anymore and is coming home. However, on her way to the airport, she witnesses rays of light emanating from the sky, guiding her to a specific location. Intrigued, she decides to explore the place and comes across Father Gabriel's grave, where a man asks if she knew him. She denies it, but notices it is the same date her mom died. She asks the man to explain the inscription's meaning, and he reveals it signifies being cradled in the arms of the Lord. Nicole realizes that Father Gabriel was possessed by a demon, which passed on to Adelina after his death. She returns to the monastery and, with Sister Lena's help, discovers that Father Gabriel's final exorcism was on Tavian. She visits Tavian's house, where she learns that Tavian had actually brought the priest to help his father, who was tormented by dark thoughts, and a voice that urged him to kill his son. Tavian had tried to take him to the church, but the voices threatened to kill him if he entered. So, Tavian brought Father Gabriel to their home. He says he thanks God every day for what Gabriel did for him. Nicole then notices Tavian standing there, and as she approaches him, she sees that he has written the demon Agaris name. Nicole calls Anton, revealing that Father Gabriel's last exorcism was on Tavian's father, and the demon was Agaris. She suspects it has now possessed Adelina, but a demonic voice suddenly interrupts, and the call cuts off. The front door slams shut, and she scrambles to escape, but an unseen force pulls her back. The lights flicker violently, while water drips from unseen leaks. Suddenly, the demon attacks her, lifting her to the ceiling before slamming her down onto the table. Meanwhile, Anton grabs an axe and breaks the door open, just as the demon lifts Nicole in the air. Anton steps into the house and sees Nicole suspended upside down in midair. As the demon looks at him, Anton tells it that it is wasting its time, since Nicole has no faith for it to corrupt. He begins the exorcism, reading prayers as the demon continues to torment Nicole. She screams, claiming it is killing her, but Anton persists, urging her to call on God for help, reminding her that she needs faith to fight the demon. The demon snatches away Anton's book and crucifix, but Anton declares he doesn't need them because he already knows its name. He asks Tavian and his father to help him. They both immediately grab Nicole while Anton continues reciting the prayers, and finally, they manage to bring her to the floor. Anton continues the exorcism, urging Nicole that she must fight back, or she will never see her mother again. He places his necklace on her and insists, "Don't let this demon drag her to hell," and he cannot do this without her help. Nicole struggles against the demon as Anton persists with the prayers, and after a tense battle, they finally succeed in defeating it. After a few days, Nicole has recovered and developed faith in God. Father Dumitru and the 4 nuns were convicted of murder and released after serving 7 years in prison. Upon release, Father Dumitru moved back to Tanaku, where he continued performing exorcisms for his congregation